Welcome to our Trapeze webinar. My name is Meg Metchard and I'll be your host today. We are really excited to be with you again to present the third webinar in our series focused on the rail network planning lifecycle. Now, I know we're all fairly familiar with webinars by now, so I'll keep the housekeeping items brief. You'll notice a Q&A box on your screen. You can submit questions to our panel throughout the presentation and they'll address them during the Q&A session. There are also complementary resources on the left of your screen for you to access at your leisure. If you've been with us for the series so far, you will have heard from some of our European customers on how they're using technology to help them be more efficient and effective with their planning. In the first webinar, Peter Halsken presented how Norway are enabling efficient, long-term planning and scheduling of their operation. In the second webinar, Araz Zikami from Arriva, Sweden, talked about how they use technology to effectively manage a large and diverse workforce with a focus on the day of operation. In today's final event in the series, we are thrilled to have our rail team from around the world present their insights on how to effectively plan and run your operation across the whole rail lifecycle. Here at Trapeze, we really like to share the key learnings we're obtaining from our customers from a global standpoint. So with this in mind, let me introduce you to our speakers. First, you'll hear from Ben Dvoracek, who is the General Manager of our rail business in Australia and New Zealand. Ben will set the scene and talk about the full network lifecycle and introduce the state of play in rail, outlining some of the challenges and opportunities that we see in this space. Next, you'll hear from Antony Chilton-Murphy, our UK Director of Rail. Antony will focus in on how technology can help deliver long-term plans, outlining the hidden value, and using the UK and European markets as an example. Then we will introduce Paola Realpozo, who is the North American Vice President of Rail. Paola will outline how the technology can help overcome many of today's challenges in the management of your workforce, focusing on the day of operations. Finally, Ben will provide a short summary before we move into a question and answer session. Okay, Ben, welcome and over to you.
All right. Thanks, Meg, for the lovely introduction. So as Meg mentioned, I'll be taking everybody through the state of play in rail as we're seeing it today, based on discussions we're having with customers. We'll get into a bit of the network planning life cycle, how we see it, how technology really helps foster the efficiencies in those various sort of planning cycles. And then Paola and Antony will take you through long and short-term planning and workforce management. And then we'll get to the Q&As. So really, when we look at recovery, transport is a state of recovery, and it's different in all parts of the world, depending on where you're seated. It's in recovery, patronage is going up or potentially even going down, but it's in different states. Now, one of the positives that's coming out of this is that there's actually studies being conducted, I think the most recent one in London, where there is absolutely no correlation between COVID transmission and the use of transport. Now, one of those reasons could be because there's tens of millions of dollars being injected into transport to increase cleaning capacity, but that is, it's a unique fact. So really, there should be no reason for people to start getting back on transport. Some of the other opportunities that we've seen is work has changed. Before, when we had a 9-to-5 culture, we had peak periods in the morning and in the evening. That's now changing to a value-focused travel to the office. So we're traveling to the office when we want to meet people, not just because we have to. And everybody's actually fully capable of working from home. Now, there's been a great need for efficient decision-making. We've had to react quickly, and we've had to react well. Now, we've shown how efficiently we can pivot and make decisions when there's changes that we've never been exposed to in the past. And decision-making has played a vital role in facing disruption and sustaining efficient and viable operations through such an unstable time. And then when we look at the changing in ridership, peak service is spreading. Those demand sort of spikes throughout the day. That'll now be leveled off. So there's an opportunity to expand demand throughout the day. People want to travel when there's less crowds, and this allows us to take advantage of all hours of the day, take advantage of our assets rather than having 130% capacity at peak periods and then much lower during the day, and allows for more dynamic services. So when we look at recovery, we have to do this in a sustainable fashion. We can't have people entering into cars. We need to get them back on rail. It's no secret that we are social creatures. We are mobile in nature. We want to see people. We have to get to work. We need to travel. It's part of our health. It's part of our daily lives. And it also includes social inclusion and equality. It brings more people together. Now, trains connect people with cities. They connect people with work. A lot of people have moved into suburbs, and trains are the fastest, safest, and most efficient mode of getting into cities. And then when you're in cities, rail is actually the predominant use of transport inside urban centers. So it is such a huge part of how we commute. Now, I was listening to the Australasian Railway Association Value of Rail study that they released, and a really interesting fact is that for every commuter train of passengers that do not return to public transport after COVID-19, it's expected that there will be 578 more cars on the road. So think of that for a second. Big, right? So every train car that we have full reduces 578 cars on the roads. Now, rail is the most sustainable mode of transport outside of walking, of course, and taking a bike. Trains take cars off the road, as we just mentioned. They reduce emissions, they save time, they save lives because of so many accidents or crashes out on the roads, and they promote good health. There's studies out there that the distance you walk to and from a rail service can actually lead to walking marathons by the end of the year. So it does drive a lot of walking, which is good for your health. Another thing that came out of the study that I mentioned earlier was that each train of commuters has an environmental benefit equivalent to planting 1,800 trees a year. So when we're looking at sustainability, it sort of encompasses such a big array of areas on the rail network with people and the surrounding environment. Now, I was listening to an interesting discussion where the CEO of mobility for Siemens mentioned that trains can actually run profitably with 25% capacity. Whereas when you look at other long distance modes of transport, air travel, for instance, you need to have a much higher percentage of capacity of patronage on that flight to actually have it run profitably, which increases the reason why private companies would continue to run rail. Now, there's actually technology that's being put in place now with rail lines that will run completely on battery and hydrogen, making it absolutely a carbon neutral footprint, which is amazing, right? So that's zero carbon. So now we're looking at closer to the walking and biking. And rail is also a sustainable instigator of economic recovery. So there's lots of injections of capital going into new rail lines being built, and that's creating jobs, that's spending money, driving local smaller businesses to flourish and to really to stay alive actually in this day and age right now. And finally, with sustainable recovery, this is largely what we're seeing going to be driven by technology. Now, what we've heard in speaking to a lot of our customers is that if they haven't had technology in certain parts of their operation, they've really felt it over the past 7 months. So without systems in place to support remote work, so every business, regardless if you're in transport or not, having your staff move to remote, if you haven't had that capability, that's been a pain or a difficulty. And then in rail, automating changing plans, rosters, duties, mid roster, you're having to change everything and provide that information to your staff. If you haven't been able to do that remotely and you're bringing all your staff into a depot during a time of a pandemic, has made it increasingly difficult to manage the crisis. Never mind, without systems in place to test scenarios and be confident in what you're doing, it's made it difficult as well. So technology enables efficient operations. It allows you to expand your network in times where there isn't a crisis, right, when you're investing in infrastructure. But technology will also support this evolving norm. So we're not quite sure where it's going to land, but in order to get people back onto transport, technology will play a key part. Now, whether that be through dynamic scheduling, right, where you're focusing your scheduling on the demand of people, or whether it be the demand for cleaning. So that's already played a part, but cleaning trains takes additional crew. That crew needs to be communicated to. It might play a new part in your maintenance regime. So all of these systems impact your plans, impact your rosters, impact your workforce management, your maintenance, and all of those regimes. And at the end of the day, we're doing this all for the passengers. So, you know, ensuring that you can provide information out to your passenger about things like crowds and how busy the rail service is, and the fact that you're cleaning. And I'm sure we're going to find more and more data that we can provide to the customer that's going to make them feel comfortable. That'll be integral to ensuring that we get people back on rail. And when we look at increased safety, efficiency, reliability, we see these technologies that support the life cycle of planning to operations really revolve around these three key things. So better plans for passengers will get them on rail and create a safer environment for them to travel. Now, mobile solutions, so you can communicate to staff without bringing them into the depot, provides for a more comfortable and safer work environment. You know, when we look at efficiency, making decisions and automating of simulation, planning, workforce management, and operation, that really leads to increased efficiency in decision-making, because you can test scenarios, you can do that quickly, you can get that service out to your passengers. And then decisions that are based on data analysis and supported by science and powerful algorithms are just by nature more dependable and more reliable, right? People feel safer getting that service out there. So really quickly around the planning life cycle and how technology plays a part for the rail authority. So there's that strategic level that happens before things ever hit the timetable. When you're looking at expanding your network, at increasing the frequency of the network, adding stops to a particular line, there's a level of simulation where you can actually test the network before it ever actually makes it out into the network. So you can test how much energy consumption there'll be, and how much it'll cost you, what kind of resources you will need, and things of that nature. There's full technology in place to support that. Once that's completed, that information makes its way out to the planners, where they're tactically deciding on the long-term plan and what that will look like, what kind of resources you need to structure and support that timetable. And then we get into really the plan optimization. So optimization engines that are working behind the scenes to make sure that you're providing the most efficient schedule, but not only that, that it's robust, that it's dynamic, and that it's practical and it's deliverable. You know, once that's created, you have your crew rosters. That's essentially where you're providing your duties and out to and communicating that to your staff. So doing that remotely and understanding what kind of rolling stock you need to deliver on those schedules. And then that's all then handed over to the day of operations, where they're managing the service with all of the disruptions that tend to happen on a rail service. Nothing goes to plan, but these solutions ensure that you have all of the right functionality to make decisions on the go and ensure that at the end of the day, you're providing services to the people that depend on you the most. And when you have a system that's across the entire life cycle, you can take the data that you get and the key learnings that you have at the end of the day, once you've done the day of operations, once you've done that day, and send that back out to the various individuals that play an integral part to the delivery of that, whether that be your schedulers, your planners, people in charge of your resources, so that they can learn from it, and we can then optimize and create even better schedules for the passengers. So with that, I would like to introduce Antony to take us through the hidden value of long-term planning in rail. Over to you, Antony.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, good morning, everyone. What I would like to talk about as a non-planning specialist, and I hope this does justice to planning specialists in this world. It's a fantastic and mission-critical role for the rail industry. I'm going to talk about a live setting in the UK, and I hope in doing so I do them justice, and I wouldn't mind some feedback from them afterwards to see whether I've done that. I'm going to talk about the role and purpose of long-term planning specialists in this live setting, and I'm going to talk about the constant process of change, of challenge, and of disruption. And those aren't words that have come in the COVID world. Those were words beforehand. COVID world has just added to those. And then I'm going to talk briefly, and it is just briefly, about digitization and sustainability and the kind of tools that you can use to work in the long-term planning space. In this terms of this live setting, I've used the UK as a good example, not least because I know a reasonable bit about this. So, amazing thing has happened in the UK in the last 4 or 5 years. Essentially, up to 8,000 new trains have been procured in recent times under new finance models, and all these trains have made their way to, or are in the process of making their way to the network. And you can see the map of the UK there, how dense it is in terms of intercity and inner regional, outer region, and metro services. Some of the trains that have been procured are on the left-hand side there. There are other manufacturers other than Hitachi. I noticed that the Hitachi pictures survived, but there's a beautiful London North East Railway one at the top and ScotRail in the middle. And Trans-Pennine Express on the left. But most rail companies in the UK in the last few years have huge sales, huge incoming new fleets about to come into service, and all types of rolling stock, metro, regional, intercity stock, and also critically, and I'll mention this later on, electric and bi-mode, and also still diesel in some places. All of these trains have come in on the basis of a steady and sustainable increase in capacity needed for the railway. Since I think the late 90s, it's been steadily growing, and there's more people travel on the rail system in the UK than at any time ever in its history. And one of the key issues, there's a bullet there on my slide. It's such an innocuous and small point that says new trains allow for ambitious new timetables. Oh boy, underneath all these new trains is the fact that they all can accelerate faster and decelerate faster than their old rolling stock that's leaving the services. Now that's a crucial point, because as a result of which you can then alter the dwell times at every station. And as a consequence, when you run through the modeling and the calculations, this gives a fantastic opportunity to increase capacity on the network, and therefore a monumental, a gargantuan change to the timetable structure in the UK. Think of the consequences of all these trains coming into service in and around the same time, with an awful lot of passenger expectation, passenger experience. My next slide here talks about the role and purpose of planning. It essentially resonates with what Ben was saying before. In terms of timing, planners, long-term planning specialists live in this central area. It's a tactical area. It's usually months away from actual on-the-day service. It's where timetables are generated, rolling stock schedules are created, and crew schedules are created. It is the plan, and it follows on from the simulation. And you know, on paper, it's a really simple thing to do. You just assign the optimum trains and crews to run the timetable. You know, what can be difficult about that? You need to detect and resolve conflicts and inefficiencies. That again seems normal, and all you're trying to do as a long-term planner is to create robust and dependable working timetables with ready-to-implement scenarios, you know, bad weather scenarios or emergency timetables or whatever. On paper, it's a relatively straightforward job. And why do it? Well, we are all trying to do it to reduce the cost of operations for the railway. And also, ultimately, strategically, it's all about carbon consumption in the end. It is trying to be as economical as possible with all the assets that you've got to provide the timetable that you need to supply. If that all goes to plan, then it's a case that the rail company, if it's a good timetable, it's robust and it works properly, a rail company can focus on what it wants to do, which is to earn revenue and to provide a good, excellent customer experience. So, you know, yeah, train planners, our unsung heroes. I'm just going to give you some examples here of how many challenges this role can face, this critical role. And just looking at the three boxes on the slides there, infrastructure in the UK, levels of electrification is just one example of changes in the infrastructure, where lines have been planned to be electrified and electric trains have been bought on the understanding that they'd be electrified. It turns out that only 30% of it has been electrified, meaning that there's more burden and pressure on the need for the bi-mode trains, where they run on electric wires when they have the wires, and then they switch to diesel when the wires are gone. That's essentially going to happen all over the UK. And changes in the timing of these plans has had a massive effect on long-term planners and their ability to try and work out and maintain this idea of a robust, conflict-free timetable. Very hard when the infrastructure keeps changing and the plans for electrification keep changing. Now, add to that, there's a picture of the trains there. They're actually CAF trains. What happens to a long-term planner if suddenly a new fleet of rolling stock is announced to be 6 months late, or a year late, or half of it's ready and the other half isn't? It means that the outgoing rolling stock can't be cascaded anywhere else, and it means that for an ambitious timetable, you're suddenly dependent on the old rolling stock to try and meet the new robust timetable, which was dependent on the increased performance that was coming in from the modern trains. So you've got an instant conflict, and something that long-term planners really have to wrestle with. And on top of that, you've got to have the right kind of driver to drive all these new trains. Think about these 8,000 trains. All these drivers need training and certifying, and of course, they need to have cabin training. And you can imagine what happened during the COVID process, where social distancing was a problem, 2 people needed in a cabin. There were circumstances where whole fleets have been delayed into service because drivers can't be certified. So for a planner, it is a very, very challenging set of circumstances, all colliding and crashing into each other at the same time, which is why my bullet there says they're the unsung heroes of the railway. And also, in terms of passenger experience, passengers knew in the UK about signal failures, freight trains breaking down, that was a good one, and they know when a new train is coming. There's a lot of expectation of these new trains. But because of all this clash of circumstances, it's only on a timetable change in 2018 that the travelling public began to realise the importance of a timetable, that it can't work if the trains aren't there, or the drivers aren't certified, or they just can't meet the performance of the timing expectations. And that adds to the boxes below, and it's just a recap there, what long-term planners have to do for their day job. Their day job is to take a master timetable and work through and create train diagrams, conflict-free, robust timetables. But certainly in the UK, they couldn't have been put under more pressure in these last few years. And honestly, they've done the most incredible job of making things happen under difficult circumstances. So in terms of, what can we do to help? And this is variable across train companies. The key is about long-term train planners. They are specialists. They are experts. They have deep rail knowledge. They're not just borrowed from another control center from another mode of transport. They have deep knowledge of the rail system and the way it works. And often sitting behind that deep knowledge is some very, very elaborate, incrementally grown spreadsheets, which creak under this kind of pressure. It's very difficult to make things work. Now, there is software and tools. We're not the only providers of software to handle these kind of issues, although ours is good. And you can never replace the planner. The software is just to enhance the planner's role. That's critical. And it's critical if planners are to manage this continuous disruption, and it is going to be continuous, and COVID is just that extra layer of disruption. They will need agile and resilient software tools to help them do their job. And also, another very small discrete point there, rail operators globally depend on planning to close the revenue cost gap. Rail companies cost a lot to operate, a lot. It's vital that you don't produce a timetable that introduces 9-car trains with half a dozen people on, when a 3-car electric train or battery train would have been a better option. So it's critical that powerful tools are used to maintain the agility and the resilience and sustainability of the railway. And ultimately, when we move away from COVID into another world of recovery, carbon consumption will yet again become an important issue. And these are the types of tools that can deal with things like carbon reduction. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there because I spelt a very complex story in the UK. I hope that was of use in this long-term planning space. I hope long-term planning specialists out there, I did you justice. Thank you for listening. I'm now going to hand you over to my colleague, Paola Realpozo, and she will move down the sequence towards shorter-term planning and workforce management in particular. And she too has a very interesting story, similar situation in another part of the world. So thank you again. Thank you for listening. Just transfer over.
Thank you, Antony. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so today I would like to talk to you about workforce management, automating the workforce management, leveraging data to improve the process of workforce management, and also empowering your workforce. And I hope that today I'm able to highlight some of the benefits of having a system to manage your workforce on the day of operations. Antony explained very well some of the challenges that come with planning, right? And once long-term and short-term planning are done, there are many tasks required on the day of operations to keep trains running efficiently and smoothly as planned, right? And unfortunately, it is inevitable to experience changes derived from a series of events that happen on the day. Challenges can include operational disruptions, they can include train delays, weather, unplanned absences, incidents. And when this happens, the operation now needs to adjust the workforce in a way that requires looking at too many parameters and being able to make decisions pretty quickly. Workforce management is really complex, right? First and foremost, the unplanned events on the day directly impact your key performance indicators. And as a result, it impacts passenger satisfaction. And coincidentally, I'm not very sure about the other regions, but at least in North America, passenger satisfaction is rapidly becoming the #1 key performance indicator for transport operators. The industry is heavily regulated, right? Every employee group sometimes have its own set of requirements. Even different train crews have requirements depending on whether they are in one geography or one line. And then finally, as also Antony was explaining, right? Now with COVID, it adds a whole layer of complexity. In maintaining essential service during this crisis has introduced many challenges for the railroads. What you have in front of you is some pictures that I took a year ago. I went to visit a crew dispatch office, and coincidentally, if you can see that the date that was taken a year ago, and this is an example of manual processes, right? That one picture in the middle, that's my hand holding a red book. The dispatcher uses this book to keep track of time off requests, right? You can see there are people requesting time off during Black Friday. The operation counts on these dispatchers to remember all the crews, to remember their seniority, right? But really there's no science or a clear validation of the rules. It becomes very inefficient. The information may or may not be recorded in the system, and it's not recorded in real time, right? And then you count on the next crew dispatcher to come and almost follow the same criteria that the previous one, right? And then the pictures on the side, you can see, a lot of information presented there, a lot of paperwork, and sometimes the really important information can get lost among all the paper. So really implementing a workforce management system is essential for the operation. I'm not going to go into these details, but it really starts with just automating and simplifying all the different labor-intensive operational tasks. It helps to manage and reduce your cost We're not relying on people remembering a large amount of information that is really important because it has to do with bargaining collective agreements, it has to do with rules. The right solution will also help you integrate with other systems downstream, and then that just helps to increase the value of the automation. I think today is very easy for many of us to understand the inherent benefits of having a solution that automates manual processes, just of the nature of having a lot of technology around us these days. But what I want to highlight here is like how these benefits translate to benefits for the passenger, right? When these manual processes are removed from your workforce, then the train crews can now focus on delivering great service to passengers and also communicating with them, right? And think about these times with COVID, where now we are really in the need for these crews to advise and guide passengers, and also for themselves to practice safety. We can also integrate, as I said, with other systems, and not only as it relates to workforce management, but also other systems, so that we can really provide reliable service and information to passengers around their journeys. And I wanna highlight some of the benefits through a couple of examples. So the example on the left is our customer in Texas. In this case, attendance was being tracked by having each crew punch an index card into a clock, and then they would write their name and their run number on the card. And this became a very stressful and cumbersome, time-consuming process for both the crew dispatchers and the crews. Also, the communication with the train crews and management had to be done in person for anything, right? Bidding requests, requesting vacation, even disciplinary actions. So this also led to miscommunication. What happened was our customer ended up implementing sign-in terminals for attendance. So the crews will just come and tap, I don't know, their key, their personal key tag, and then it was very quickly, right? They also use the messaging capability from the sign-in terminal. So as soon as you tap to sign in, you will receive a little note with important information related to you specifically. The crews were also able to use web tools to find their information about work schedules, set up bids, check their all the information, and then just do it from the convenience of their homes, right? It's all online, or even using their smartphones. And then the operation now could track the working hours of the crews and even receive notifications when a person was working close their limit. So they really streamline many of the supervisors' tasks, especially the bidding process. And you can see in the example, they went from having to use 2 to 3 supervisors managing bidding requests down to 1. So a huge savings there. The second example that you have on the right, another customer, they are in Michigan. The crew dispatcher often spent maybe 8 hours calling, right, and contacting crews via phone to solicit their bid choices. And then he would capture all that information on paper, right? And then this person will turn over that paper to a second person who would spend maybe 3 to 4 hours entering all this bid information from the paper into the system. And then what they did, they also implemented web servicing tools for the employees. And now these employees can access online, right? They reduced, as you can see, from spending 11 to 12 hours on admin labor each day down to 1. And if you think about it, like their bid cycle usually takes 13 days. So spending all these hours every day, they were able to save more than 100 hours in labor just for this process of bid request, right? So also a lot of savings there. And I'm including here a couple of pictures there. On the left-hand side, you can see an example of a sign-in terminal. And then the box here on the right is where the messages can come as soon as they sign in and sign off. And then on the right, there's just a screen, just additional information and help for crews that they can have in the office. And really, when a crisis hits, like the one that we are experiencing nowadays, a workforce management system can really help keep employees safe, right? And I'm not going to go into all of these details, but it's becoming really relevant these days. Once we implement a solution that automates manual processes, I think the benefits don't have to stop there, right? These systems have the ability to collect a lot of data and integrate with other systems. So now you can start looking at optimizing your processes. You can identify opportunities for further savings, and even just take a close look at trends that allow you to understand why things happen the way they happen, and then maybe adjust or change how you do things. And I'm going to try to explain how. So what you have in front of you is a very simplified process and data flow. And when you automate this process, it's obvious you change manual tasks to automatic tasks. So that already has its benefits, right? But then you can leverage data to improve cost management, for example, right? And to give you more explanation on this, I'm going to use the payroll example. So our customers have this huge number of payrolls, right? When they are defining the collective bargaining agreements, it's usually at a very high level, and they may not necessarily understand the implication of these rules that they are being implemented into their payroll, right? So when customers go into union contract negotiation, having some of the historical data and systems that can actually help them run what-if scenarios will help them be more informed. And sometimes the operators may be negotiating things that look like very simple points, but these may represent huge savings, or vice versa, right? So it's good to have this data available at every part of your process to be able to really understand the impact. What are the savings? What are your expenses? So again, it's about being able to model different, in this case, payroll scenarios, and understand how that affects your bottom line. Which ultimately this is all about, right? Like creating efficiencies and really being able to optimize the cost. You can also leverage data to improve the creation of shifts and planning, right? And for this, I would like to touch on the example of absences. So for many operators, right, absenteeism is a big problem. But why? Why is this such a big problem in some of with our customers? One of our customers in Illinois was telling us that in their case, people don't have a lot of flexibility in the way they create these work and shifts. They have the regular shifts, and they also have a lot of split shifts. Just the nature of having peak hours force them to create these split shifts. And as a consequence, people have difficult time trying to manage their personal lives, right? I don't know, they need to take kids to school. They need to go to take their medical appointments. So they don't really have a lot of flexibility. And it's not that they want to abuse the system, but they really don't have any other choice but to miss work to be able to manage their life events. So for this customer, this is a fundamental reason why absenteeism is so high. So what happens is usually operators want to know how to get to the lowest dollar. So they implement this type of run cuts, right? So that the theoretical cost of operation goes down. So that means that they ended up creating a lot of the split shifts in this case, right? And that makes sense from a cost standpoint. Now, this specific customer, right, he's trying to leverage data so that they can look at maybe minimizing these split shifts, and then by a consequence of that, giving crews more predictability to be able to manage their life. This person believes that by doing that, he's gonna see a reduction in absences, and then potentially compensate what we believe is gonna be costing them more. So again, it's about creating what-if scenarios, provide more accurate predictions of these events so that you can plan better and have efficiencies and cost savings. All right. When we think about implementing a workforce management system, I think people tend to believe that the benefits stay with the operator, with the transit agency, and it really is also a win for employees too, right? Workforce management solution come with tools that empower employees so that they can be self-sufficient. They don't have to wait long times on the phone, waiting times on the phone. They don't have to be listening to pre-recorded messages. They don't even have to travel to the office, right? They can just go online and find their information. So they can, just have a look at their work assignment whenever they want. They can look at bid results. They can look at absence accruals, anything they would like to know. It's there. It's at the moment that they need it. They don't have to be waiting, right? They don't have to rely on someone telling them, when the other person is available. We have a customer in California that wanted to implement these tools for their employees, and they had a challenge about adoption, because they are allowed to be only in person, right? So they were concerned about asking people to have to use these tools. What they do is they let employees opt in voluntarily. They told them the tools are there, use them if you want. And they were really surprised at how most of the employees were actually adopting these tools, and the employees were really engaged, and they felt that they were considered, right, by giving them this flexibility. And then, COVID aside, there is a lot of turnover. So any efforts that we can do to help our workforce really go a long way to retain employees. One other big driver that for employee engagement is saving time with admin tasks, right? Whenever there is a mistake, because we have a human error, we have a manual process that you just have a mistake. It generates so many tasks, right? It just becomes really consuming, and then they spend a whole day fixing these mistakes. And some of the employees believe that these mistakes are being done maliciously, right? They start losing confidence, but it's really not, right? So whenever you remove that from the equation and they just simplify the whole process, the employees notice, right? And you want employees that are engaged, you want employees that are happy, because ultimately they're going to be able to deliver the great service to the passengers. And just to finish, I want to leave you with this quote. This quote was provided by Christine Glass. She's a former train crew, and she shared her story with us a couple of weeks ago. And this really summarizes what I'm saying, right? I mean, she's the testimony of how, not having information available really impacted her personal life. And then by giving the crews this type of tools really empowers them, right? Makes them happier. So again, if they are happy, they're going to be able to serve your passengers better. Thank you. Back to you, Ben.
All right, thanks, Paola. So just to wrap this up, I guess before we get into the Q&A, what do we want you to take away from this? So there's a lot of information. We've talked about recovery, sustainability, digitization, and really having a sustainable recovery plan is incredibly difficult if you're doing things in an unsustainable fashion. So digitization and automation, they're going to provide the tools for you to run scenarios, to make really effective decisions based on historical data and analysis. And really a safe recovery, managed remotely, communicated effectively and more confidently is a result of having technology in place to enable your people to do that. So, long-term resilience is really driven by technology and data and agile solutions. And when we look at leveraging digitization through the full planning and operation lifecycle, it's really fundamental to driving recovery, achieving your sustainability, achieving efficiency, and supporting our efforts in getting out of people getting out of their cars and getting into trains. So thank you so much. I think we're going to move to some Q&A. So Meg, I will let you guide us from here.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, and thank you, Paola and Antony, for sharing those insights. So I'd definitely like to kick off the Q&A session. Let's start with a question for the whole panel. What has been the impact of COVID-19 on the planning and operations space? Antony, would you like to kick this one off?
Sure, yes. Well, Well, as I said before, the whole business of COVID is just another layer of complexity that was already on top of a complex situation. Initially, at the outbreak of COVID, it was all about getting planners to be able to work from home with all the software they needed. Then there are issues of sickness, and by that I mean things like trying to keep the availability of trains coming out of depots when they're managing people who've gone into isolation, and trying to keep availability of more trains up due to social distancing. So, for example, a 4-car train needs to be run as an 8-car train to make sure that we meet social distancing rules. So that adds an incredible complexity to timetable planning. And I think going forward, it's all about the volatility and ridership now. As everybody knows, ridership's right down. It will steadily grow back, but it may never reach its original pre-COVID levels for many years. It may be patchy. People's patterns of work have changed. And I think for timetable planners, it's all about trying to plan, predict, forecast, and make sure that you don't end up with a load of 9-car trains running 6 services an hour when you just needed 3 services an hour with 3-car trains. It's that kind of volatility that would need to be thought through.
Ben, Paola, anything to add on top of this?
Sure. I think, I think just we know. I think what we notice is how comfortable is for some people to access information remotely, right? And then having the ability to adjust very quickly, Meg, just changing the roster, mid-roster, and really being able to operate in a way that is really dynamic. Things are changing every day. So it's really important to have the ability to adjust that way. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, right, like those tools that allow people to enforce safety guidelines, and for the employees in this case, just being able to practice social distancing with these tools as well.
I guess that leaves me. So I guess the one thing I can add is the discussions we've been having with the customer here in Australia, and really they utilize us on the scheduling and planning standpoint. And one of the discussions I had with the GM in February was, March, April, was that they were so happy that they have a planning system in place, because had they not had that, they couldn't imagine putting new schedules in place that they had to do as quickly as they had to, and they had to change rosters as quickly as they had to. Now, the issue was that, they had just acquired the workforce management and the mobile crew apps and the day of operation system, and they said because they didn't have that in place, there's a pandemic, and you're not really quite sure what the pandemic means because everybody's still trying to figure things out. But they're forensically pulling people into the depots to communicate information, and deciding how to do that in a safe way when you don't have information, and you're sort of going against the rules of the pandemic. That was something that a key learning for them. And really what we've done now is we've been actually, when you talk about change, even when deploying technology, there's certain things that we would have never done remotely that now we're deploying the entire workforce management system without really ever seeing the end change agents at the customer side. So I think we had the first kind of kickoff meeting at the customer site, and we haven't seen them. So, but you have to be flexible, and you have to even be dynamic in situations like that to continue moving on.
Well, I've got you, Ben. I've seen a question that's come through directly for you. You mentioned sustainability. Can you clarify, did you mean products that are sustainable, or did you mean in an environmental sense?
So probably both. I guess the biggest part of why I'm so proud to work within the rail industry is just because rail is the most sustainable mode of transport, right? So I think I talked about 1,800 trains per rail set. I talked about 587 cars if you have a full train. So, and then now trains moving to a complete carbon neutral method of travel. So that's why I'm most proud. That is really the sustainability engine in people mobility. So that's really the bulk of it. Now, in order to drive all of the funding that goes into those assets, right? Rail lines are expensive to operate, as was mentioned earlier, and there's a lot of money that goes into those assets. It's the products that really enable staff to run the service efficiently, to test scenarios, to make sure that the best potential service is being offered to people, and then we're learning from the end of day and feeding that information back to the start of the life cycle. So it's sort of an entire chain of sustainability, driving people out of their cars and into rail.
Thank you, Ben. That's really interesting. I'm going to throw another one out to the panel, and hoping Antony or Paola can start with this. How do you see the industry changing from a planning perspective, with ridership trends changing over the course of a day?
I think that it's exactly what I said before in terms of agility, and a spreadsheet ain't going to cut it. It's as simple as that. And no one really knows at this point how ridership is going to recover and settle with all the new patterns and trends, which are actually all pretty obvious to us all, aren't they? I think it's key that we have powerful software, excellent long-term trained planning specialists with all their depth of knowledge to be able to respond and respond quickly. And as I mentioned before, I can foresee a situation where we provision a timetable that's very short notice, that's held as a scenario in very short notice, and suddenly it has to change within days of when it was intended to be used, while services shut down and start up, or there's sudden peaks and troughs in people. And we may well get spikes of people in some metro areas around the world where there was a plan to bring one in 6 months, but in fact it's brought in a matter of days. So it's a very volatile situation. The more resilient and stable the tools are that the planners can use, the better we'll be able to get on top of that curve.
Thanks, Antony. Would anyone else like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I guess I can just mention that. Obviously, I mentioned a little bit around the fact that people are going to be flexible in how they travel. So when you look at scheduling of trains and you have that timetable to put into service, being able to dynamically change that table once it's in the operation. So once you're actually delivering the service, being able to potentially send new trains out there when there's events that you weren't quite planning for, pulling some off when there's not as much demand out there. If you have events where people are out in the cities and you could have weather pattern that brings a storm in and people are going to want to take the train to head home, being able to react to Antony mentioned having the solution to do that at the day operations once the planning perspective is completed will drive our ability to react and do that in a sustainable way that has a better way of sort of connecting transport with demand.
Megan, and just to add to what Antony was saying, right, about using the tools, he's right. I think tools today are available to really enhance our ability to look at information, see the impact that it has to our operation, almost like in real time, right? Things are changing, and not only limited to our area of work, right? Our roles, but also really what's the impact to the entire operation, right? These tools can connect to other systems. We're able to provide reliable information to passengers quicker. And then, as I said earlier, right, how does these changes that are happening every day, adjustments, really impact other systems downstream, like payroll, just in general, like the other operational systems that affect directly and indirectly the customer satisfaction and other KPIs.
Thanks, Paola. I'm going to keep moving on. In your opinion, what element of rail planning has the biggest impact on improving passenger experience?
I think I can answer that, right? And I think it has to do, again, with the same thing. we hear from our customers that disruptions on the day of operation is really what becomes a major challenge. So really having systems in place that help them make changes to the schedule quickly and accurately be able to inform passengers, right? And this is only possible if you have such integration. First of all, you have a system that is able to capture all the information in a way that is efficient without the many manual tasks. But then how do you integrate this with other systems to be able to achieve that ability to inform the passengers of what's happening all the time?
Thanks, Ben. It'd be really interesting to hear your input on this one.
So yeah, I guess from the planning perspective, once that is complete and it heads into the next cycle where you're in the operation side of things, really it's when there's changes, right? So changes that are occurring last minute, whether that be people being people and things happening and people calling in sick, not being able to make it into work. It's ensuring that you have a plan for demand, a plan for your workforce so that you can manage anything that comes up throughout the day. So at the end of the day, you've kind of got everything in place so that no matter what happens, as long as you can deliver service, then the people are still accessing the rail that they need to get to wherever they're going.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I've got one for you, Antony, that's come through. How would your software respond to rapidly changing parameters?
Well, it's the same thing as I said before, really. It's all about agility and resilience. For example, there's a piece of functionality in our tools called What If Scenario Planning. And it's used widely by our customers to place in layers of situations in eventualities, in case things happen. And it's that kind of thing that you can't do with a spreadsheet. And that's just a typical example, but the functionality where you can deploy something very quickly and push it into the short-term planning scenario. And I think I just wanted to add as well with what Ben was saying about acting on the day in terms of on-the-day operations. Behind the on-the-day operations is a robust conflict-free timetable in the first place. And there was a picture on one of my slides with a whole load of people waiting on a platform while the train was on the other side. It starts with a workable timetable that's achievable, and then hope that in actuality on the day it fulfills itself. But if that of itself isn't accurate, then the short term on the day becomes carnage. So it's vital that tools are resilient and that there's functionality in those tools to be able to carry out all kinds of difficult scenarios, from rolling stock availability, crew availability, depot issues, line blockages, anything that would disrupt the timetable. It's all in the resilience of the software.
Thanks, Antony. I am conscious of time, so I'm going to ask one more question to the panel, and that's in your experience with your customers, what element of your software has made the most difference to improving workforce experience? Paola, would you like to start?
Meg, you were, sorry, workforce experience, is that what you said, right?
Yeah, so in your experience with your customers, what element of your software has made the most difference to improving workforce experience?
Okay. I think that just the nature of automation really creates an impact, right? I show you some of the pictures of those manual processes. That's even when customers start implementing these tools, it's really difficult for them to remove themselves from these manual processes. It's almost like a thing that they do, right? That it's really hard for them to have change management. So just the nature of automating tools, going through this change management process really allows them to create immediate benefits for them. A lot of work with the crews and the dispatchers, in this case, to be able to show them the value of having these tools in place. I wanted to emphasize the last part that I talked about empowering our workforce. We have such good self-servicing tools, right? We have tools that have become really, really relevant during this time, especially with COVID. People need to work from home. People need to avoid traveling if they don't have to. People cannot congregate in areas to be just reporting for duty and looking for information. So having this ability to check your information online from your home, from wherever you are, being able to come to a workplace that is safe because you have ways to allow for social distancing. So it's obviously I'm emphasizing all those things based on the current situation with COVID, but it just tells you, right, that that system just provides so many efficiencies and so many positive results for the both the operation and the crew members. It's really impactful when you see that change come through in the operation.
Thanks, Paola. Ben, Antony, did you have anything else to add? I'm thinking, with increased reliability of services, you increase your passenger satisfaction levels. Do you think that in turn reduces the stress and makes life and stress less for your staff, for the crew and
Yes.
the employees?
It's just a straight yes to that.
Yeah. I agree. It's, so Paola's mentioning when people have tools to do things, they're more confident in the decisions they're making. And if you could break it down to, Excel, when I use Excel, I'm much more confident in the result that comes out at the end of the math that I'm doing. Now, in transport, within rail, any mode of transport, we're solving for some really, really complex problems. So having the systems and the algorithms in place make you a lot more confident in the problems that you're solving for. Even though you have very, very skilled people behind it, having the math, the solution to really just double check what you're doing makes you feel more confident, makes the workforce feel more confident. And just looking at it personally as well, I can't remember the last time I had to write my holiday on a piece of paper and get it approved, or when I had to deliver expenses even with the receipts, or if I had to manage my timesheet manually. So that hasn't existed in my life, I don't think, ever. So for rail authorities and transport operators to not have a system like that in place when, you're so reliant on your people, it's almost, you need to know where they are, when they're logging on. They need to be able to access their information all the time. I think it's crucial that these systems are in place, and that would, obviously, if I was a train crew operator, that's what I would feel would make me feel very comfortable and probably increase the competitiveness of rail organizations as they're trying to attract new talent.
Meg, can I just add something to that? And I'm glad that Ben brought that up. It is really complex, right? The number of rules, the number of requirements, skills that are required for the specific job, right? For train crews in this case, it's immense, right? I cannot stress that enough. The number of things that we need to be looking into can only be managed by a system like this, right? There's no way that a person can just keep and retain all this complexity in their mind to be able to make decisions. We may be able to make decisions, right? But these decisions will impact our performance. So these decisions will probably not be as good as if we were relying on a system that can keep all these rules together. When COVID hit, right, we had customers that they have complex labor agreements that ensure payment for employees, even when they don't necessarily work, right? So COVID hit, that puts a toll on who can work, who cannot work. Just a reduction of service didn't allow for some people to be able to work, right? So who gets to work and who gets to be paid, and how can you balance the act between seniors that are allowed to have priority on the work, but then you have the junior staff that are not working, but that are still ensuring to be paid. So it was a really complex situation, right? So only by having these systems in place, you can really operate.
Just to jump in there as well, following that exact thing, in terms of long-term planning tools, there are hundreds, thousands of business rules associated with crew, and they vary slightly between all rail operators around the world, and all those rules need to be understood and loaded into the tools to be able to effectively create crews that fit the trains for the timetable. And of course, you can't allocate a driver who's not certified to drive one train if it's another train that's demanded on the timetable. So the levels of alignment is absolutely essential, and all those rules need to be loaded in order to get an efficient working timetable. So it happens all the way through the cycle of planning.
Thank you, Antony. And look, I am conscious of time, so I'm going to stop the Q&A session now. For anyone who submitted a question and we didn't get to it, we'll make sure that someone gets back to you shortly. This does conclude our rail series on optimizing rail planning, workforce management, and day of operations in times of uncertainty. For those of you who missed part 1 and 2 of the series, we will be sharing the recording links with all attendees in the coming days. So thank you again for joining us, and enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.